Why is it that friends of Serena Vanderwoodson have to search for her suitor? Have fables fallen so out of fashion that princesses have to do everything themselves? Call us old school, but sometimes the fairy tale ending requires the knight to get off his ass and saddle up his steed.
To quote New York-based author Marcos Gonzalez, these are some big-time white people problems. Gonzalez, of course, is referring to the novels penned by Jane Austen, making this remark years ago in the same class I am currently in. With this quote neatly displayed on our syllabus, I have kept it in mind while working my way through her literature this semester. Austen's most well-known novel, Pride and Prejudice, is no exception, and is as full of as much frivolity and ridiculousness as it is sappy romance. All our characters are firmly seated in the 1%, despite Lady Catherine being personally offended the Bennets never had a governess and calling them broke with bad taste. Keeping that in mind, I would classify Lady Catherine as the biggest white problem in the novel, causing tension wherever she looks. This got me thinking about Lady Catherine in general and her worst moments, including her surprise visit to the Bennet estate to prevent Elizabeth's engagement to her nephew over an implied incestual engagement over 2 decades old. Lady Catherine was right about Darcy's proposal, of course, but how did she know about it? Austen never tells us, and the source of Lady Catherine's information may be forgotten by the text, but remained in my head long after I finished reading. Until I came up with several theories of possible sources, which I will share with you now. Strap in, because this is over 25% of my grade. Okay, for the ease of everybody watching, I've decided to break up these theories into 3 sections. 1, impossible. 2, maybe. 3, my personal favorites. Our first theory is that Elizabeth tells Charlotte, who tells Lady Catherine. This is impossible because Charlotte, number 1, is a good friend to Elizabeth. She understands people. There's no way she would tell Lady Catherine just to gossip if she's bored. She has better things to do, and she's too kind for that. Also, we see Elizabeth tell Jane in the book, right when they meet, right after she's done visiting Charlotte and Jane is done being in town. They come back together, and Jane is the only one that Elizabeth tells about Darcy's proposal. There's absolutely no reason to assume that Jane Austen intended for Elizabeth and Charlotte to converse and then not show it to us. She doesn't shy away from showing us interaction between women. That's what drives a lot of her books, and that's what makes her books so appealing, along with the romance, the relationship, and the friendship that women find with each other. It's crucial to Austen literature. If Jane Austen wanted us to think that Elizabeth told Charlotte, she would have shown us. All right, theory number 2. Darcy tells Bingley, who tells Caroline, who tells Lady Catherine. Also impossible. While my point about female friendship being absolutely huge in Jane Austen literature, I will say one of the best friendships in her entire literary collection is between Darcy and Bingley, in my own personal opinion. They're best friends, they'll always be best friends, and they're kind of cute together. Darcy and Bingley are very close. Bingley cares about Darcy a lot. He doesn't push Darcy to interact with other people. You want to dance? No. That's all good. Doesn't pressure him to do anything, and they are very, very close. So close that even Darcy's cousin Fitzwilliam knows how close they are. If Darcy told Bingley, Bingley would want Darcy to be happy and would want him to be with Elizabeth. After they do get engaged, and Elizabeth is breaking news to Jane, Jane mentions that her and Bingley had talked about the two of them getting together, but decided it was impossible. If they had talked about that, and if Bingley knew that Darcy had feelings for Elizabeth, there was no way he would have written that off as impossible. He cares about his friend. They're besties. They're homies. They're buddies. He's gonna look out for this guy no matter what. And if that means hooking him up with his fiance's sister, that's what he's gonna do. But he doesn't. Impossible. Bingley is too good of a man to have ignored that. Theory number 3. Lady Catherine decides to jump to her own conclusions and decides to accost Elizabeth based off of no real proof, just a feeling. Definitely impossible. She sucks. She's very opinionated, very blunt. We know what she's thinking, why she's thinking it, when she's thinking it, the works. That's what you get when you're rich and everybody in town is kind of scared of you. That's what we get, that's what we see, that's who she is. She reports hearing a rumor of their engagement specifically. With a woman as blunt and honest as this, it would be completely in character for her to visit Elizabeth based off of just suspicion of them flirting or possible feelings. She would totally feel justified in that. She feels justified walking into her home and saying, this place looks like crap, so she definitely would have no problem coming to Elizabeth and saying, I've noticed some tension, stop flirting with my nephew. But no, she specifically said that she hears a rumor that they are engaged, or at least of Darcy proposing to Elizabeth. She doesn't need to lie. She's too powerful for that. You could just say, you looked at him the wrong way, don't do it again. She doesn't. Lady Catherine might be mean, but she's not a liar. So therefore, there's also no way that that could have happened. Our next two theories are going to fall under the category of maybe. And maybe this is how it happened, and I could definitely see that, but there's some other theories that I kind of like more. Theory number one. Charlotte tells Lady Catherine in an attempt to get Lizzie and Darcy together. Hear me out. This theory, of course, assumes that Charlotte doesn't know they actually got engaged. This is her line. Oh, why would that happen? Why would that happen? Well, if we take a closer look, again, I will say that Charlotte, if modern day, then it would be like one of the best therapists you've ever met in your life. She understands people. She's the one that says, Jane, you need to show a little bit more attention to Bingley, otherwise he's gonna leave. She's the one that says, Elizabeth, you gotta dance with Darcy. He asked you, it's gonna be fine, you'll be okay. She's the one that says, I need to get married to Mr. Collins because I'm an old maid at 27. Oof. And I'm a burden to my family, and this is the most practical move for me to make. She understands people, she understands life, and she's a smart girl. She also cares about Elizabeth a lot. They are besties, okay? They are good friends. Several times in the book, which I will point out now, Charlotte mentions her theory of Darcy being in love with Elizabeth. And this is before the first proposal. She knew. Knowing that, I wouldn't be surprised if she could see the feelings that Elizabeth also had for Darcy bubbling under the surface. Charlotte telling Lady Catherine, she's smart. She knows what that's going to imply. She knows the possibility of that absolutely bubbling over and exploding with Lady Catherine riding in where they're from is a total possibility. She needs to get her way. But same time, understanding people, having her confront Elizabeth would also mean Elizabeth herself has to confront her own feelings about Darcy. And that's exactly what happens. She finally confronts her feelings about Darcy during the scene where Lady Catherine takes her on a walk and says, are you engaged to my nephew or not? You can't be. Her stubborn refusal to promise to never to be engaged. That's Elizabeth finally coming to terms with the fact that maybe she doesn't hate Darcy. Maybe she actually kind of likes him. So if Charlotte told Lady Catherine, this would have worked exactly as she planned. And I don't know. I'd like to think that Charlotte has a little bit more agency. I like to think that she's, you know, not just sitting in her house bored while her husband looks out the window like a dog. So, yeah. Second maybe theory. Caroline telling Lady Catherine in an attempt to break up these two. Now, it is obvious from the very first time we see her that she is obsessed with Darcy. She loves him. My brother's best friend, whatever. That's her son. She infatuated with this man, even though he does not like her in the slightest. We're going to start with maybe the cons, maybe what kind of stands in the way, kind of opposes this theory. If Caroline tells Lady Catherine, that would mean Lady Catherine not only would be up in Elizabeth's business, but also eventually Caroline's business as well if she tries to make a formal move to Mr. Darcy. Because, again, she only wants Darcy with Anne, nobody else. And she will do anything to make that happen. But Caroline isn't the smartest when it comes to understanding people, which we see again through her many painful interactions with Mr. Darcy. How she cannot take the hint that he does not want to talk to her at all. Clueless. Absolutely no idea. That's a different Jane Austen. Whatever. She has no idea. Can't really read people that well. So it would follow that she's not going to think that far ahead. Somebody who hates the same person I do, my enemy's enemy is my friend. And she's immediately going to put her plan in motion. As far as the timeline goes, Caroline would have to visit Lady Catherine on her own without Bingley there, because Bingley would be at the Bennet's house courting Jane. Now, her relationship, her connection to Lady Catherine is through Bingley, through Darcy, all right? So her going there randomly doesn't really make that much sense. So it's kind of a toss-up. Does she, on her own time, without her second-hand connection, visit Lady Catherine just to say, hey, I think they're engaged? Does she? I don't know. Do keep in mind, like Charlotte in the last theory also, this is her line, just to get Lady Catherine worked up and angry. Caroline's not really above line. We see how she interacts with Jane. We see how mean she is to Jane, especially when she implies that Bingley knows Jane's in town and doesn't want to see her. But we find out later, that was a bold-faced lie. She just wanted Mr. Darcy all to herself, so she wanted Bingley to get with his sister. Whole other thing. She's not above lying to get what she wants. This one may be a little bit more probable than this guy, only because I think that Charlotte is a very, very kind person, and I am not fully confident that she would put Lizzie in the path of Lady Catherine, knowing how cruel Lady Catherine can be. So those are the maybes. Okay. These last two are my personal favorite theories. A little bit convoluted, but that's fine because they're interesting and they're fun. First theory, Lady Catherine's account or report of Darcy proposing to Elizabeth is actually a misconstrued rumor of Collins proposing to Elizabeth. Hear me out. It's going to be one of those kind of through the grapevine type of things. The gossip gets, turned into something else. But if you are paying attention, you know that Darcy and Collins have a somewhat similar relationship with Lady Catherine, all right? She's his nephew and, his only really remaining close, older family. And Mr. Collins has Lady Catherine as his patroness. So she's both in a more, I would say, parental or caretaker somewhat. She doesn't really need to do that for Darcy, but in some way or another, both these men are associated with Lady Catherine, around the same age, and they still have some kind of similar relationship to her. She's this patroness figure to him, she's an aunt to him. So, why do I say this stuff got misconstrued? Well, after Elizabeth shoots Mr. Collins down, he leaves and he hangs out at Lucas Lodge. Barely any time passes before they're engaged. Whoop whoop. Yay. Good luck, girl. Now, Mr. Collins getting engaged to Charlotte that quickly? Come on. That's in poor taste. Everybody could see that. And everybody in Lady Catherine's town, right? Everybody in Lady Catherine's town is indebted to her in one way or another. She says jump, they say how high. She says bark, they say woof. Whatever. Passing around a rumor about the man she's a patroness of moving on from one woman to another that quickly? Scandal. And people would be scared to say anything bad about Lady Catherine because, let's face it, she kind of sucks and she's mean. So it makes sense for somebody who has heard this rumor, maybe second-hand, third-hand, to assume, oh, they probably mean Darcy, the one who's still single. Definitely not this guy, because he's married. Then rumor makes its way to her, and then she loses her mind. I think this theory wouldn't be that valid if this were any other author or any other book, but this is Pride and Prejudice, and gossip is a huge theme for Jane Austen and this novel especially. I mean, think about Wickham and how his account of what happened between him and Darcy was so different than what actually happened, and how because of that and because of all Wickham's lies, Elizabeth's whole family hated this man for gossip that was completely untrue. It would make sense for one of the most climactic points in their love story to have happened because of misconstrued rumors. That's a staple of the story. That's a staple of the author. For our last theory, I'm going to be calling a surprise witness. the servant at Mr. Collins and Charlotte's house. Hear me out. This proposal happens when they are alone. She just found out he got in the way of Bingley and Jane getting together. She's sickened by this man. Sick. She can't go to see Lady Catherine, all right? She's frustrated. She's aggravated. She is beyond consoling. And she is for a few days, because Darcy comes twice. First time, he just kind of stands there. Second time is when he actually does propose. She's alone in the house with the servants, but Charlotte, Mariah, Collins, everybody else is dining with Lady Catherine. There's nothing for the servants to do. Number two, this was back when people needed somebody to open the door for them if they were upper class. As we see, this picture was taken from the BBC 1995 miniseries when Mr. Darcy first walks into the room with where Elizabeth is sitting, and then he proposes to her. This servant opens the door. My theory is she tells Charlotte, who tells Collins, who tells Lady Catherine. And yes, I'm aware this is a little far-fetched. They don't really mention a servant. They don't mention this servant, at least. So how could this be possible? What does it mean? I will actually be referring to a different book, Lady Susan. Lady Susan was written before Pride and Prejudice. In Lady Susan, a servant is the one who finally snitches on Lady Susan hooking up with a married man. And that's what leads to the whole climax of Reginald de Courcy finding out that Lady Susan was lying about who she was and losing interest in her, and she has to marry the other guy who she really doesn't like, and Mrs. Mannering's there, and she's upset that Lady Susan is sleeping with her husband. Just go ahead and use this handy-dandy diagram that I made on a whim. And it's an entire mess. And it happens because a servant is ordered to report what he saw when he was dropping off Mr. Mannering at Lady Susan's apartment in the city. We know that Jane Austen at least has the idea or the knowledge of having servants play into the spread of information in our head. She's already done it. She's already used it. And you know what? It was a great plot device. Who's to say she's not going to use it again? But the maid would have definitely told Charlotte. But just because the maid knows doesn't mean that she would automatically tell Charlotte. I understand. But when Lizzie comes to visit Charlotte and Mr. Collins, we see they're basically like roommates. Don't really do much. Her room's in the back of the house, his room's in the front. Doesn't really seem like they spend a lot of quality time together, kind of what's implied. But Charlotte's pretty social. She's kind, she likes to talk to people, she likes to interact with people. Who's to say she's not getting that human connection with maybe her servants? They're chatting instead of the time she would usually spend chatting with her husband. If that happens, it would then, of course, follow that either she tells Mr. Collins or he overhears, because he just has a tendency to just be in the worst places at the worst times because he's the worst. Then, I mean, if anybody breathed in the wrong direction, Mr. Collins would report straight to Lady Catherine. News of this nature would knock her socks off. Of course he's going to tell. How did Lady Catherine find out about Darcy's proposal to Elizabeth? What made her think matchmaking between cousins was a good idea? Why does she suck so bad? These are all questions we may never know the answer to, and that's okay. Austen's work is complex and thought-provoking, with a fan base that's ever-growing. I'm just here to add to the discourse and avoid writing an essay. I'm Shinji Ikari. Please give me an A.
Sin City was an
angel. You catch my nephew? No. Are you gonna catch my nephew? I'm not. Are you gonna? No, I can't make any promises like that. I hate you, you suck. No, you suck. Does that hair look okay this way?
Yes.
Okay. Get out of my house. I never. That's okay. No, that was so cringe. That's okay. Does she take the initiative to go out, or does she just sit in her room conniving and like drawing crosses all over a picture of Elizabeth, hoping that she eats rocks? Mm-mm. Can you see me?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not dabbing at the end, by the way.
You should.